Yeah, thank you. I think that the takeaway that I have had is that clinical trial data is a public good, and it was emphasized again and again. And of course, that means that there's many, many stakeholders, some of which each of us didn't even know about, and their basic rules and norms of behavior. And I think as we sort of dug into, session 2 was aimed towards digging into examples of data sharing exercises and what they've brought to us and some of our challenges. We've learned about the differences in cultures, practices, expectations, rules, laws, that each of us really ultimately will need to understand. And as we understand and develop adequate communication and mutual understanding, I think we will get to a better place. And some of those stakeholders are represented here, but missing are, for instance, plaintiffs' lawyers. We didn't have as much from privacy. We didn't have speakers from patients, advocates very much, but we did in this session a little bit. I'm not going to recover the issues that were mentioned before, so just going through the session talks, Deborah Zarin already reemphasized a key issue that she talked about, which is transparency is extremely important. And then ultimately, the point which I took from the later part is that we cannot trust summary data. And that summary data also has the issue of being, frankly, inaccurate occasionally. And that is probably why, although maybe underemphasized in the talk, but emphasized to me in a few comments later, that is why in many cases regulatory agencies on the review side don't rely upon summary data and in fact look at all of the data, even including source data in some cases, to make their full analyses, to make judgments about approvability and safety and other issues. Very important point and a big contribution of clinicaltrials.gov. Hugh Jones, who spoke about DataSphere, really brought a wonderful vision of what could happen if he created what he called an iTunes or an iStore of data sharing. And I think we heard this again and again, including from the last talk from Will Banks from SAGE. And that the ultimate principle that he talked about was that that to get a decline in cancer rates, again going to this complex disease problem, you really need to have sort of third-party aggregators which have no judgment and sort of no stake. So there isn't the kind of manipulation or control, and we heard about extensively data non-sharing in different worlds that have to be gotten around, and this would be a model that does so. We heard extensively about Dr. Kuntz and, frankly, Dr. Krumholtz, who had to leave, the Medtronic example and the YODA project, which is, as you all know, the recombinant bone morphogenetic protein project, which was led by inconsistencies in data, and the company took a very bold and visionary perspective of depositing all of their data to create trust in the system into a new way of looking at it through, in collaboration with academic investigators, some of whom have not been pro-industry and were thought to give a fair and objective analysis. And those analyses are underway, have not yet been published, but it would avoid any speculations about what happened in terms of missing data. And I think that this is, and conflict of interest, and I think that this is an important opportunity for a path forward. Many challenges, of course, have been identified by the YODA investigators as they move forward. I'm checking my time. And de-identification was expensive, although that's been challenged by others. But the goal is really to find the truth and to perform a public service. Doctors Wagner and Rabinowitz provided two wonderful examples of data sharing initiatives, one which validated a biomarker which no study could have done on its own, the adiponectin biomarker, re-emphasizing some of the issues of trust and openness which were needed. And then Dr. Rabinowitz showed very impactful ways to alter the trial design in an entire field, psychiatry, research, schizophrenia, and ultimately depression, where, for instance, if you're on the research side trying to pay for these studies, he showed that you could get the same power from 46 patients as opposed to 79 patients, which is going to be extremely important. And then in the barrier session, in my last 36 seconds, Jen Jeter really provided some information which, frankly, I didn't know. Many of us may not have known so much about all of the legal issues and challenges, both on the privacy side, but also on things like the CLIA rule, which recommends, which for scribes telling patients about their outcome on a non-CLIA approved study measure, which really raises questions about when we go to patient data being put on the web, what will they learn, and does that actually conflict? And I think her main point was that there's a tremendous societal and regulatory ambivalence about the wish for data versus the fear of disclosure, which came up again and again. And her analogy and metaphor was the tree rings, where regulations come up in bad years and then they go down in good years, but there's a continual sort of accretion of these regulations, which are very challenging. Kelly Edwards emphasized the ethical issues, and I think that's a wonderful bringing together of stakeholders today and thinking about common values, common cause, and transparency. Her point about that the floor one is regulations, and we must go beyond that to seek higher values and also put the interest of advocates at the forefront. I'm over time, but Dr. Ioannidis talked about, and this came up again and again, how articles are merely an advertisement for petabytes of information, and that frankly even the journals are not adequately complying with their own regulations, and that came up again and again. And I'm very pleased to end on the comments and the vision of Sally Oken from Patients Like Me, who spoke about that subjects and patients may be actually a pejorative comment, and that these are really citizen researchers who are contributing in an altruistic way to the care and well-being of future patients, and that we should curate but use their voice in a more consistent manner.